There's one thing that the majority of men over 60 do completely wrong when they decide to take creatine. And the worst part is that they do this thinking they're taking care of their health, thinking they're doing the right thing, but in reality, they're wasting money, time, and in some cases, they might be putting at risk exactly what they want to protect the most. And what makes this even more dangerous is that no one warns them, no supplement seller warns them, no fitness influencer post warns them because talking about this doesn't look good. But what they don't tell you could be costing you dearly. And I'm going to tell you now. I'm Dr. Natália Castro, and I'm going to explain this to you clearly without beating around the bush, without fear of contradicting what the supplement market wants you to believe. First of all, I need to ask you a direct question. Do you know exactly what happens inside your body in the first 30 days of using creatine? Not what the label says, not what the store seller promised, but what really happens system by system, organ by organ, cell by cell. Because this answer changes everything. And I'm going to give you that answer today, but not all at once. First, I need you to understand why so many people are starting from a completely wrong foundation. Because if you start wrong, no matter the quality of the supplement, the result will disappoint. Let's start from the beginning with the thing that scares people the most and that makes many men not even start taking creatine. The fear for the kidneys. You've probably heard someone say that creatine destroys the kidneys. Maybe it was a friend, maybe a family member, maybe an article you quickly read on the internet without much context. And this fear is so strong that many people dismiss one of the most studied, safest, and most effective supplements in the history of science before even understanding what's behind the story. So, let me explain where this myth came from, because this is one of the most classic cases of confusion between correlation and causation that exists in popular medicine. When you start taking creatine, a blood test will show that a marker called creatinine starts to rise. And then comes the scare. High creatinine in a blood test is a classic sign that the kidneys aren't functioning properly. It's what doctors look at when they want to evaluate kidney function. So when the patient shows up with this elevated number after having started taking creatine, it seems obvious that something's wrong, doesn't it? The problem is that deceptive appearances aren't the same as scientific truth. What's happening there is completely different from kidney damage. What happens is that creatine, after being metabolized by your body, produces creatinine as a byproduct. More creatine entering the system means more creatinine exiting. But this creatinine isn't there because your kidneys are failing. It's there because the supplement is being processed normally. It's like confusing the exhaust from a well-functioning car with smoke from a fire. The appearance may be similar, but the origin is completely different, and so are the consequences. Dozens of studies tracking healthy people using creatine for years, not weeks, years, consistently confirm that there's no measurable kidney damage in those with healthy kidneys. The number rises on the test. The kidneys continue functioning perfectly. This is documented, this is peer-reviewed, this is published in the world's leading scientific journals. And yet, the myth persists because it has a very strong emotional appeal. It activates fear, and fear is faster than reason. But now I need to warn you about something important. There is an exception to everything I just said, an exception that completely changes the equation. And you need to know what it is before deciding anything. I'll get there in a few minutes, but first I need to debunk two more myths that are making people make wrong decisions about creatine. The second myth is cramps. How many times have you heard that creatine causes cramps, that it dehydrates the muscle, causes spasms, leaves you locked up in the middle of an exercise? This myth has logic behind it that seems to make sense, but in practice, it works exactly the opposite way. Here's what really happens. Creatine retains water, that's true, but where it retains it makes all the difference. It retains it inside the muscle cell, not outside, not in the subcutaneous tissue, inside the fiber. And when the muscle cell is well hydrated, it functions better, it contracts better, it recovers better. It's more resistant to spasms, not more susceptible. Cramps happen in many cases when there's an electrolyte imbalance, when the muscle is underhydrated, when circulation is compromised. Creatine acts precisely against this scenario, not in favor of it. So, if someone took creatine and had cramps, the cramps could have had a dozen other causes. Creatine, in most situations, wasn't the culprit. It was the convenient scapegoat. The third myth is the most absurd of all, but also the most common. The idea that creatine is a type of anabolic steroid, that it's a disguised hormone, that anyone taking creatine is somehow doping. This has no biological basis whatsoever. Creatine doesn't fit into any class of hormonal substances. It doesn't mimic testosterone. It doesn't act on androgen receptors. It doesn't come anywhere near the hormonal pathway that anabolic steroids operate on. What creatine does is much simpler and, at the same time, much more interesting than any synthetic hormone. It works within an energy system called the ATP phosphocreatine system. Translating straight to the point, it helps your cells produce energy faster when you need explosive and intense effort. It's like having an emergency generator inside the muscle. When the main energy drops, the generator kicks in. When the workout gets heavy, creatine kicks in. No hormones, no manipulation, no doping. Pure cellular energy. Now, there's a fourth myth that's more subtle than the others. And precisely because it's subtle, it causes more damage. It's the myth that creatine makes you fat, that if you take it, you'll go up on the scale, and that means you're accumulating fat. Many people stop taking creatine because of this. They see the number go up, panic, throw the container away, and reach the wrong conclusion. What's happening when the scale goes up? Intramuscular water retention. As I already explained, water inside the muscle. More water inside the muscle means more muscle volume, more muscle efficiency, more strength. It's not fat. Water and fat are biologically completely different things, but they're numbers that rise the same way on the scale. And the scale doesn't distinguish, your metabolism does. If you take creatine, train with more strength, generate more muscle overload, your body will build more lean tissue, more muscle, and muscle weighs more than fat per cubic centimeter. So the weight goes up, but body composition improves. Fat doesn't accumulate because of creatine. It can accumulate because of caloric excess, a sedentary lifestyle, a hormonal imbalance, not because of creatine itself. But here's the part that few explain. Creatine won't do absolutely anything for you if you don't move your body. The supplement is a potentiator. It potentiates what you're already doing. If you're not doing anything, there's nothing to potentiate. And this is a critical point for those over 60, because the reason creatine matters more in this age group goes far beyond training. I'll explain this in detail, but first I need to show you a fact that almost no one knows. Comment below where you're watching this video from, because this content has reached people from very different cities, and I want to understand where the men seeking this quality information are. Back to what I said. The fact that almost no one knows. Starting from age 50, the human body begins to lose muscle mass progressively and acceleratedly. This process has a name: sarcopenia. And it's not a fad, it's not an exaggeration from doctors, it's not something that only happens to sedentary people. It happens to everyone. The difference is the speed and intensity with which it happens, depending on how you take care of your body. Sarcopenia isn't just aesthetic. It's not just about looking stronger or more defined. Sarcopenia directly affects your mobility, your balance, your ability to do the simple things in life without depending on anyone. Climbing stairs, carrying a grocery bag, getting up from a chair without using your arms. These things that seem trivial today can become serious obstacles in 10 or 15 years, depending on how you take care of your muscles today. And creatine, in this context, isn't a bodybuilding supplement. It's a longevity tool, a tool for autonomy. Studies have shown that creatine supplementation in men over 50, combined with some form of resistance exercise, helps significantly slow muscle loss. It's not a miracle, it's biochemistry working in your favor. But there's another benefit that rarely comes up in conversations about creatine for older men. A benefit that goes far beyond muscles and involves an organ you probably wouldn't associate with a sports supplement. I'll tell you what that organ is and why it matters more than it seems. But first, I need to finish talking about bones. Did you know that creatine also has an effect on bone health? This isn't in the supplement's marketing materials. It's not on the packaging, but it's in the studies. Creatine seems to positively influence pathways that regulate bone tissue formation. In regular doses, it helps reduce the rate of bone mass loss. And for a man over 60, this isn't a detail. Osteopenia and osteoporosis aren't exclusive to women. Although they're talked about more in that context, men also lose bone mass with age. And a hip fracture in an older man is an event that changes lives, and rarely for the better. The combination of stronger muscles and denser bones creates a more resistant skeletal structure, less risk of falls, less risk of fractures, more years of mobility, more years of autonomy, more years of quality life. This is the kind of benefit that changes the argument about creatine from a gym supplement to a longevity ally. Now, the organ I mentioned, the brain. More recent studies done with neuroimaging technology and cognitive biomarkers have shown something that surprised the scientific community quite a bit. Creatine seems to have protective effects on neurons. It improves the functioning of mitochondria inside nerve cells. And mitochondria are the power plants of every living cell. When the mitochondria in neurons function better, the neuron survives better, resists aggressions better, ages more slowly. This mechanism has been associated with protective effects in neurodegenerative diseases. Parkinson's has been studied in this context, Huntington's disease too. It's not that creatine cures these diseases, but it seems to create an intracellular environment that's more resistant, more resilient, less vulnerable to the type of deterioration these conditions cause. And this, for a man entering his 60s or 70s, is information that matters. Additionally, there's evidence that creatine improves cognitive performance in high-demand tasks, concentration, mental resistance to fatigue, the ability to maintain attention on something difficult for longer, for those still active professionally, for those with projects, goals, responsibilities that require a well-functioning mind. This is a benefit that goes beyond the physical. And there's the cardiovascular benefit, which also isn't talked about frequently. Creatine seems to help in the recovery of the heart muscle after exercise. It may have a modest but measurable effect on regulating systolic blood pressure. And for a man over 60, well-controlled blood pressure isn't a detail. It's vascular health, protection against stroke, protection against heart attack. It's a piece in the puzzle of a heart that lasts longer. Now, I want to talk about the function that no doctor mentions in a quick 15-minute consultation. The function that interests most men who come to this channel the most. what creatine does or doesn't do for your erection and your sex life. I'll be completely honest with you. There is no published study that demonstrates that creatine directly improves erections. It doesn't have a vasodilator effect. It doesn't increase blood flow immediately to the pelvic region in the way specific medications do. Anyone who tells you that creatine will work like a remedy for erectile dysfunction is selling you a fantasy. But now comes the part that's true and that matters. The indirect effect of creatine on your sexual function can be quite significant, and it works through a chain of events that makes complete sense when you understand it. You train with better quality, you manage more repetitions, more weight, more time under tension. Your muscle responds better, your body composition improves. You lose visceral fat, which is the most harmful fat, the kind that accumulates around organs and interferes with hormone production. Less visceral fat means better insulin sensitivity. Better insulin sensitivity means a better hormonal environment. A better hormonal environment means higher natural testosterone production. And testosterone matters a lot for erectile function. It doesn't act directly on the erection mechanism, but it maintains desire, vitality, circulation, the health of the tissues involved. A man with healthy testosterone has more libido, more energy, more blood flow in the pelvic region. And more blood flow in the pelvic region means better erectile quality. Creatine is at the beginning of this chain. It's not the remedy, it's the catalyst that potentiates the behaviors that lead to the result. And speaking of results, before moving on to the practical part of how to use creatine correctly, I want to ask you a question. Are you making any of the most common mistakes that completely sabotage the benefits of creatine? Because these mistakes are simpler than they seem, and they make the difference between a supplement that transforms and a supplement that disappoints. I'll show you what they are now. Mistake number 1 is irregularity. Creatine doesn't work like a pre-workout. It doesn't have an immediate single dose effect. It works by accumulation. The muscle needs to be saturated with creatine for the benefits to manifest consistently. And saturation doesn't happen in 2 days. It happens over a few weeks of continuous daily use. Anyone who takes it for a week, stops, takes another week, stops again, is in a cycle of saturation and depletion that never allows the muscle to reach the point of maximum benefit. Creatine needs to be taken every day, including on days you don't train, especially on days you don't train, because that's when the muscle is recovering, remodeling, absorbing nutrients every day without exception. That's the most important rule and the most disregarded. Mistake number 2 is inadequate dosing. Most people take too little. They're afraid of overdoing it, afraid of overloading the kidneys, which, as I already explained, isn't a real concern for healthy people. And they end up taking 2G, 3G, a small scoop thrown in a glass of water, and then no results come, and they conclude that creatine doesn't work for them. It's not that it doesn't work, it's that the dose was never sufficient to saturate the muscle. The standard recommended dose for most adults is 5G per day. For those over 100 kilo, it may be necessary to take 8G. For those under 55 kilo, 3G is sufficient. But the point is, this dose needs to be taken every day consistently for weeks, not days, weeks. If you want to understand more deeply how to protect your health in an integrated way and avoid the mistakes that silently compromise your vitality after 60, I've made available in the pinned comment below this video the medical guide to avoid mistakes that damage the prostate after 60. It's material I prepared carefully for those taking male health seriously in this phase of life. It's not material selling supplements. It's practical medical information organized clearly. Access it now in the pinned comment. There is the so-called loading phase, which consists of taking 20 grams per day for an initial week to saturate the muscle more quickly. It works from a speed standpoint. You'll feel the results faster, but it's not mandatory. If you take the regular dose daily, you'll reach the same saturation in 2 to 3 weeks without the gastrointestinal side effects that some people report during the loading phase, like abdominal discomfort or mild diarrhea. My recommendation: forget the loading phase. Adopt consistency with 5G a day. Dissolve it in the liquid of your preference. At the time of day that's easiest to remember and maintain. In the morning with coffee? Great. At lunchtime? Great. Before workout? Great. After workout? Also great. There is no scientifically superior time. What exists is the time you'll be able to maintain for months and years. The third mistake, and this is the most surprising, is choosing the wrong type of creatine. The market today offers creatine hydrochloride, creatine ethyl ester, buffered creatine, creatine with different brands, promising superior absorption, increased bioavailability, faster results. And all this costs significantly more than the option with the most scientific evidence. Creatine monohydrate, simple, cheap, studied for decades in hundreds of researches. It's the one that's the basis of all the scientific literature on creatine. It's the one that demonstrated all the benefits I talked about in this video. The premium versions in the vast majority of comparative studies don't show significant advantages over monohydrate in terms of results. What they show is a higher price. Choose monohydrate from a brand with quality certification. Save the money left over for another aspect of your health. Now, remember I said at the beginning that there was an important exception? The situation where everything I explained changes completely. It's time to talk about it. If you have pre-existing kidney disease, any degree of diagnosed chronic kidney failure, creatine should not be used without direct medical evaluation and monitoring. Period. No negotiation. The reason is simple. The metabolism of creatine already elevates creatinine as a byproduct, as I explained in a healthy kidney. That's not a problem. In a kidney that's already compromised, any additional load on the filtration system can be harmful. A diseased kidney doesn't have the same safety margin as a healthy kidney. So if you have or suspect you have any degree of kidney impairment, if you've had tests showing changes, if you have diabetes for many years, if you have uncontrolled hypertension for a long time, get an evaluation with your doctor before starting supplementation. This isn't a generic package insert precaution. It's a real clinical indication. There's also the case of vegetarians and vegans. This group deserves special attention because they're starting from a different situation than most. The main natural sources of creatine in the diet are meats, especially red meat and fish. Those who don't consume these sources have significantly lower natural muscle creatine stores than those with an omnivorous diet. For this group, supplementation isn't just advantageous, it's especially impactful. The results in terms of strength, recovery, and body composition tend to be more pronounced, precisely because the starting point was lower. But there's an aspect of creatine use that's rarely discussed, and I want to address it before wrapping up. The question of cycling: do you need to stop taking creatine from time to time? Do you need a monthly pause? A quarterly pause? Is there any risk to continuous use? The science's answer is clear. There is no evidence supporting the need to cycle creatine use. Long-term studies lasting years have not identified any adverse effects related to continuous use in healthy people. The idea of cycling probably arose from analogy with other supplements and substances that do require periodic pauses to avoid receptor downregulation or hormonal dependence. Creatine doesn't work that way. It doesn't act on any receptor. It doesn't suppress the production of anything. It just provides additional energy substrate for a system that already exists and will continue functioning normally if you stop taking it. And speaking of stopping, what happens when you stop taking creatine? The muscle gradually eliminates the excess stored creatine over a few weeks. Weight drops a bit because intramuscular water retention decreases. Strength drops a bit because the ATP phosphocreatine system returns to operating with the substrate naturally provided by the diet. But there's no negative rebound, no muscle mass loss beyond what you'd lose anyway without the extra stimulus. The transition is gradual and physiologically normal. So the ideal scenario is you start taking it, maintain consistency, feel the results over the weeks, and continue as long as it makes sense for your lifestyle and goals. Not because it's mandatory, but because the accumulated benefits justify the continuity. And before I wrap up, I want to recap something that I said more implicitly throughout this entire video, but that deserves to be said explicitly. Creatine is safe. It's one of the most studied supplements out there. It works. The mechanisms are described, the benefits are documented, the risks are well defined. For a healthy man over 60 who's seeking to maintain or rebuild muscle mass, preserve bone health, protect the brain, and improve overall vitality, creatine has a legitimate role within a broader healthcare strategy. But it doesn't do this alone. No supplement does. It's a piece, an important piece, but a piece. The other pieces are regular movement, quality nutrition, restorative sleep, stress control, regular medical checkups. And when all these pieces are in place, creatine amplifies the result of each one. Stronger muscles protect the bones. Denser bones support the muscles. Better quality training improves hormonal health. Hormonal health improves vitality, mood, and sexual function. Everything is connected, and understanding these connections is what separates those who age with quality from those who age just with time passing. You made it this far in the video because you're taking your health seriously, because you want to understand, not just follow fads. And that's exactly why it's worth subscribing to the channel. Because here we don't talk about supplements like it's advertising. We talk about male health with the seriousness it deserves. Every week, there's new evidence-based content, explained in a human way for those who want to stay active, present, and healthy for a long time. Click subscribe now and turn on the bell, because the next video might have exactly the information you haven't found anywhere else.